Hello, college football fans. What a wild slate of games we had this last weekend. Today is Tuesday, September 30th. And from Friday night to Saturday night, just too much awesome football to watch. My girl was even like, why are we still watching football Friday night? And I was like, well, there's been three awesome games. I'm an Oregon native, and I was hoping that Oregon State would pull out that win, but unfortunately, they don't know how to get a clean field goal off, and they got two of them blocked, and they went to overtime and they lost. But man, that Florida State game was insane. I was watching it as it was going down, and I was just hoping those fans weren't going to be sent home without being able to rush that field and just being brokenhearted. And I was happily, surprised. And man, some of those people on the front of that that mob that hit that field should probably try out for that football team because they got some serious speed and get off. It was just amazing. I mean, the SEC slate was really fun to watch. I love rooting for, top-ranked SEC teams to lose, and that's not because I hate, dominant programs. I just like to see the parity. I like to see this new era in college football affecting the SEC like it's affected every other team, and them having to finally accept the reality that is this new era of NIL and playoffs and, I guess equality across the landscape. So first off, I just want to give a warning to any SEC fans out there. This is probably going to be a podcast you don't want to hear. At least this is going to be something that you're not going to like hearing. And, it's okay if you don't want to hear it. But if you do want to hear some serious truths about the SEC and understand why it's kind of in the state that it is now, I'm going to try to give you as much of an explanation and a breakdown from what I've seen over the last 20 years to give you a perspective on why the SEC hasn't even made it into the national playoff in the last 2 years. So let's get it started. Georgia. Georgia is one of my favorite teams over the last decade. I mean, the dominance that Kirby was battling against Nick Saban was just awesome to see. As a Nick Saban non-fan, in fact, a Nick Saban hater, for lack of a better word, I loved seeing Kirby, threaten to knock them out of the SEC championships or knock them out of playoff contention year after year after year. But Bama has got something against Kirby. So, it was always kind of wishful thinking on my part that Kirby would get the better of Nick. And I knew that they were on the cusp of something really great before they got their national championship runs, which, super impressive. Nick Saban's championship runs for, the better part of a decade and a half. That dominance, it's impressive as hell. It's less impressive in the light of knowing that the SEC was, especially Alabama, especially LSU, were allowed to pay players for, 2 decades. And no other programs in the nation were legally allowed to do that. In fact, they were extremely hindered anytime that there was any type of violations, anytime there was any, impropriety buying somebody a hamburger. Huge reprimands and penalties and recruiting issues. And, you see what happened with the whole scandal at USC with, the Reggie Bush situation and giving him compensation. And they took away his Heisman and they took away those national championships. And if the SEC was held to that same standard, they wouldn't have half the national championships they got over the last, 18 years. And that's just a brutal fact of reality. Nick Saban, he never talks about, I paid players, or, we had a program set up to be able to get some compensation to guys to make sure we could acquire, 5-star after 5-star after 5-star after 5-star and just have 5 stars waiting in the wings to replace the 5 stars that were going to the NFL. He acted like they were just some super dominant program that just had a recipe that nobody else in the country had. No, they had an advantage nobody else had. They were able to pay players. The NCAA and the SEC, administrators, they looked the other way, 100%. In fact, there was proof that the SEC was paying players, especially star players, to come play there. Cam Newton had the scandal during the season that he won the Heisman and the national championship. And it did not make a difference in his ability to take the Heisman and to, win the national championship. Barely win it against Oregon, but they won it. And you're going to tell me that doesn't matter, that his dad was given, $180,000 that he fully admits to. I mean, he's never denied that since, he got to the league. It was just something that they weren't allowed to openly talk about. And that was, probably the smartest thing that they did, was to act like it wasn't going on when it totally was going on. Nick got called out by Jimbo Fisher when Nick tried to point the finger at Jimbo for buying all these players once NIL started, the very first year of NIL, and Texas A&M pulled in like the best recruiting class of a 5-year stretch or something. I mean, it was just insane how many 5-stars they had on their team. And Nick goes, "Yeah, well, when you're allowed to pay players and you just go and buy them, you guys should just get all that talent." And Jimbo went, "What the fuck did he say?" In a press conference, literally, what did he say? Oh, he's calling the kettle black. The pot is calling the kettle black. Let me tell you about some skeletons I know about in that guy's closet. Let me tell you about some receipts that guy has tried to bury deep. I mean, it can't be denied. I mean, and there are countless players that have come out from the SEC and since they've left college, they got paid while they were in the SEC. I mean, Johnny Manziel was one of the most infamous, and the guy has, shamelessly and appropriately so. I mean, I appreciate his honesty for coming out and being like, "Yeah, I got paid this, or I did that, and I got paid for this, and and they ended up giving me this just so I could stay, and that was a big difference in me, going there and staying there, and blah blah blah." And it's just like, okay. I mean, everybody knows it's going on, and it had been going on for a long time, and now the SEC feels like there's some huge deficiency in their conference, but they don't want to admit it. They don't want to admit that the SEC is now the second best conference in the nation. And it's not even close. The Big Ten has won the last 2 national championships. In fact, there hasn't even been an SEC team in the national championship in 2 years. And you can just say, "Oh, that's a fluke," or "We beat each other up," or whatever. You guys play 8 conference games a year. 8 conference games. 3 cupcake-ass fucking teams every single year, just so you can get those wins and go, oh, look how tough the SEC is. Look at these records these guys got. Look at the talent that they have, and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, well, when your talent's not getting dinged up, by 1 extra tough-ass game a year, and you have all of this, I guess, superiority over who you're bringing in and how you're getting them to the NFL and all of that, and your draft stats are, higher than any other conference, that looks really, really good. That makes you feel like you're dominant. And while you were the only ones allowed to pay the players and bring in 5-star and 4-star talent and start really accruing that, yeah, you guys were dominant as hell. Props to that. Nothing else about it. I knew Alabama was going to slide hard once, Nick Saban realized, oh shit, now everybody can pay players? Well, I'm out, retired. And, that hiring move of Kalen DeBoer for Alabama was genius. The guy is a great coach. He showed that he could take, a team that had less talent, I guess, all around in Oregon, and he beat them 3 times in a row and went to a national championship. Who did he meet in the national championship? Michigan. Michigan, stacked all around. And their culture was probably the best in college football when they won the national championship. Prior to that, I would have said Georgia. I mean, Georgia had the best culture by far, in my opinion. And I realized that was completely, falling apart once 25 plus athletes for Georgia, players, ended up getting arrested or heavily fined for reckless driving and racing and all that shit. I'm like, if you can't keep your guys from making dumbass mistake after dumbass mistake after dumbass mistake times 20, man, that's a huge red flag. That's the canary in the coal mine for something's not right in our culture. They don't respect the coach. They didn't respect any of the boundaries and the standards set by the coaching staff and the administration. And, Georgia has lost games since then, since all of that, drama about the issues on the streets of Athens has become public. And Georgia didn't even, do anything in the playoffs last year. They tried, but, once you get up into the top tier competition, Notre Dame, which is going to be another topic I touch on here in a minute, and then the powers that be in the Big Ten. I mean, Ohio State ran through the SEC like hot knife through butter, and they were, in shock, essentially, the SEC fans, like, what, how are we this bad? I mean, how are we losing this bad? Who do we blame? I mean, we're so used to blaming people when we lose. We're so used to pointing a finger and feeling better about ourselves because we're not owning that there might be something about us, about the fan base, about the culture that's causing these losses or causing these issues to come up that are going to cause losses. And Alabama, I mean, you're not the only dog on the block that's allowed to pay players anymore. So that 5-star after 5-star ain't a status that you're going to hit anymore. And Kalen DeBoer, for as good a coach as he is, and he is a really good football coach, the guy has identity issues. The guy, dude, you're bald as fuck. And yet you cling to every last hair on your head. I ain't got no hair. So I buzz it. I own it. I don't, it is what it is. I wish I had hair. I wish I had huge flowing locks. I wish I had Vegeta, hair from Dragon Ball Z. Like literally, that would be my ideal hair if I could have any hair. And I'm already tall and I wouldn't give a shit if I couldn't make it through doorways because my hair was too glorious and big and, crowned out like a fucking a Saiyan king. But that ain't reality. And Kalen DeBoer acts like he's still like he's still gonna have some hair that's gonna make him look like he ain't bald as fuck. And the fact that he can't just accept that fact to me tells me so much about who he is and how insecure he is and his ability to handle adversity and reality. You might say that that's just some, ridiculously stupid thing to point out or blah, blah, blah. How many games has Kalen DeBoer lost since he became the head coach of Alabama? How many games has he lost against unranked opponents? I mean, Dan Lanning hasn't done that. Dan Lanning's a coach that every SEC team, except maybe Ole Miss, wishes that they had right now. I mean, even Georgia's over there like, shit, man. We love Kirby, but what's going on? We lost Dan Lanning, and he was an awesome DC, and since we lost him, our defensive dominance just hasn't been there. Yeah, no shit. Dan Lanning is an amazing coach. Dan Lanning came from the SEC. He brought the blueprint from the SEC to Eugene, Oregon, and went, I need to get big-ass dudes. I don't just need big-ass dudes, though. I need guys that are, going to fit our culture. Our culture is made of guys who are willing to come to Eugene, even though it's far less convenient. Got planes, trains, and automobiles to get out here. But once you're here, we're going to develop you. We're going to give you all of the support and infrastructure you need to succeed. And he's shown that as well as anybody, if not better than everybody in the nation, on top of his attitude and energy. Dan Lanning is a fucking dude. Guy's a man's man, and yet he'll let it cry. He'll let the tears flow. He will cry. And there's nothing more impressive to me than a guy that is passionate as hell and ain't afraid to cry when he has just had an epic battle and the emotions need to come out. Fucking dude. I mean, somebody is that manly. And trust me, it's manly to be in touch with your emotions. It's not manly to be over emotional. It's not manly to be like Brian Kelly at LSU or Sark at Texas. Those are two dudes that their media correspondence and just their engagement with media members alone has told me that these guys have identity issues or have insecurities that are bleeding through. Brian Kelly, obviously left Notre Dame to come to LSU because LSU was the only way he was going to be able to get to the national championship. Who was in the national championship last year? Notre Dame. Where was LSU? Not even in the fucking playoffs. Guess what? Notre Dame can pay players now too. If you just stuck it out for a year or two, you'd have been set up, dude. You'd have had the program that would get you to a natty, and you wouldn't have had to leave. I mean, the food in Louisiana is probably way better than they got up there in South Bend. But What the fuck, dude? You have looked so much shittier than all of your expectations and hype were set to show, and how you were supposed to perform as a head coach and what your team was supposed to do dominance wise. Ed Ogeron won the national championship for LSU. Ed Ogeron, still to this day, I think is a coach that if I'm an SEC team, I go, give me that guy. I might not be able to understand half of what the fuck he says, but I don't really care because guess what? He wins, and I understand the difference between a W and an L. That's all I need to fucking know. When you have the expectations that these teams in the SEC have, and you have a completely different dynamic in football now, that teams are actually allowed to come with money, give a bag, whatever. They can match these SEC teams or outbid them, and get them out of their comfortable home settings down there in the South, and bring them up and show them that they can be developed and turned into an NFL caliber player and succeed in the NFL and actually get a proper bag. I mean, who gives a shit about $100,000 a year, $200,000, up to the top guys are getting paid $3 to $5 million if they're a superstar quarterback. In the league, it's going to be 10 times that. So these minuscule amounts of money now at this point in their lives means absolutely nothing compared to the huge wealth that they're going to potentially be able to acquire once they get into the NFL. So when you're talking about player development, I think that's number one. Culture is obviously up there with player development. If your culture sucks, you're not going to be developing players because they're not going to be bought in. They're not going to be listening to you. They're not going to be caring. They're not going to be passionate. They're not going to be connected. And that's what it takes to win a national championship. You have to have depth. You have to have the mentality. You also have to have a guy, some leadership that is there to steer the ship through stormy waters. Dan Lanning's that dude. And I think Lane Kiffin is very similar to him. I think Lane Kiffin's probably the one coach with the one program at Ole Miss in the SEC that's set up to succeed in this new era. They understand transfer portal. They understand recruiting. They understand culture. Lane Kiffin has been through a ton of shit in his life. He's had to battle adversity. He's made a bunch of mistakes. He's learned what the difference is between, I guess, just selfish desires and or true intention for happiness. And now he gets that. He's got the balance to that, at least from everything I've heard from him, through media, through podcasts, through personal interviews, not just, mainstream media sources. And Lane Kiffin is the only coach in the SEC that I would, think that has any ability at this point in time to really be a threat from the SEC and build a team to be, a challenger for the national championship year after year after year. Shout out to my boy Julius, by the way. He was just talking to me earlier today about how disappointed he was in his dogs. He's a Georgia boy, and yeah, it's got to be hard. It's got to be hard to see your team struggling against Alabama the way that they did. But at least Kirby came with the mentality of winning that game and being aggressive. It reminded me so much of Oregon versus Washington just 3 years ago. That whole dynamic between Alabama and Georgia, you're a play here, you're a kick there, you're a first down here away from winning the game. And I guess that's, a really good spot to be in. But at the same time, if you aren't bringing in guys and developing them and getting that buy-in and trust, you're not going to succeed year after year after year. And that's what all these Georgia fans I'm hearing are saying, hey, what's going on? Why don't we have the talent we used to have? Why don't we have the depth we had? Everything's changed. Everything will be different from this point on. The national championships you bought for 18 plus years, essentially, they don't mean shit. Are you going to buy your way to a championship now? Good luck competing against Ohio State. Good luck competing against Michigan. Good luck competing against Oregon. Good luck competing against a plethora of teams and programs that are set up and understand that this new era, it brings a whole list of new challenges, but it also brings a whole list, a litany of new opportunities to build a program into something that resembles the SEC of 5 years ago. You have to have depth. You have to have big bodies. You have to have speed. You have to have talent. And for the longest time, Nick Saban had all of that and more at Bama. And that's, I think, something that set a standard for the SEC And at least all the other teams in the SEC could hang their hat on that, you know, a team from the SEC won the national championship. Well, we might suck, you know, blah, 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 and we'll hopefully be better next year, but, you know, we're still the top conference in the nation. We're the best. We're the best of the best. There ain't nobody even close to us. It's like, yeah, there is. Now there definitely is. And Nick Saban did every little thing he could to lie and cheat his way to national championship and all of the dominance that he had. When Oregon went to an up-tempo style of football with Chip Kelly, Nick Saban publicly came out as Oregon was getting better and better by 2010. And Oregon looked like they were going to win a national championship. Nick Saban came out publicly and slandered Oregon's style, their up-tempo play, and said that it was dangerous, that running athletes at the pace that we were was inherently dangerous and was going to cause untold injuries. Total bullshit. Never fucking happened. You know what does cause a lot of injuries? Smash mouth football. Smash mouth football was exactly what fucking Nick Saban owned. He owned, hey man, I'm going to take my big uglies, I'm going to smash them against your big uglies, and we're going to, you know, make all the defensive moves we need to make, and it might be a 3-6 final score, but we're going to win. Lame as fuck. And when he got threatened by a style of football and a different idea of how football could be played, and it started to succeed with really good efficiency, Nick Saban went out and did everything he could to get that made illegal. He tried to get the NCAA to make it illegal to run plays as fast as Oregon was playing, because he leaned on the unfounded, you know, statement that it was for player safety. Bullshit. You're a fucking coward, dude. You didn't want to have to change. You didn't want to have to adapt. You're selfish as fuck, and you just lied. And you were paying players at the same fucking time. So this whole Nick Saban is the GOAT of all time, you know, it's a belief, and it's pretty well established that he is college football GOAT. I don't give a fuck. Nick Saban, it will always be a cowardly little bitch to me in so many ways. He has some, you know, moments on game day on Saturday mornings with Pat McAfee giving him all of the energy and charisma you could possibly try to share with somebody. And, you know, Nick says, oh, shit, or something like that, and everybody laughs, and they think he's some football genius. Nah, dude. He's definitely a football genius, but he's also a cowardly bitch. Sue me. I don't give a fuck. There's receipts for that, 100%. And I got no respect for somebody who literally goes out and puts another fucking program down, who's succeeding and trying to, you know, do it in a legit legal way, because we couldn't pay players, so we got to go faster than your players. That's the only edge we can get. And when you're so cowardly that you're like, well, that's dangerous, even though I have no proof that that's dangerous. That's so dangerous. We need to change those rules immediately. That's just not safe. When you see all the injuries that were caused every single year by smash mouth football in the South, it's like, dude, you can't erase that. You can't hide that cowardly fucking shit that you demonstrated, you know, year after year. Anytime anybody was a threat, you know, Nick Saban would go out there. Like Jim Irsay. Jim Irsay, the owner of the Colts, did everything he could to get the rules changed for offensive advantages for Peyton Manning while Peyton was their head coach. Well, Peyton doesn't thrive in this rule structure, so we're going to change the rules. He was on the rules commission. He was literally on the rules commission, being able to change the way the NFL was played and regulated so his quarterback could finally thrive and succeed to his fullest potential. Dude, I mean, the receipts are there, you know. Florida's had just coaching issue after coaching issue. The talent, you know, there's always going to be a plethora, just a stockpile of talent down in Florida and in the South. But the standards that are supposed to be met by these SEC dominant teams aren't being met, and they're going to continue to not be met until SEC teams realize that everything has changed. You cannot rest on the fact that you were dominant and good or elite or the top dog in the past. That shit ain't doing shit for you now or in the future. It's only about what can I do now to get as good as I can this season and the next season and the next season. And it's follow the Dan Lanning blueprint. You know, it is. It's be a decent human. You know, be a guy that other men look up to, these young men, and want to be around. It's not be overhyped about yourself, not be so full of yourself that you feel like you have this entitlement to a victory. Because when you step on the field, guess what? The ball don't give a fuck what your record was, how many natties you won, how many SEC championships you won, how many fans you got, how many viewers you get per week. It's all about who is going to come out here and perform the best, who's got the best mentality and focus and the ability to execute on the field week after week after week after week. And now that the SEC has to play an extra conference game every year, you're going to see them taking another L. Half of the conference is going to get another loss per year just from that. And if you want to tell me that that is some sort of like, you know, advantage for them now because their strength of schedule is going to be stronger or whatever, okay, I can understand that, you know. But when you don't do a goddamn thing in the college football playoffs and you get smoked and sliced apart like fucking cheese or hot butter by Big Ten teams or even Notre Dame, bro, wake up and smell the fucking flowers. They might be not nearly as fragrant as you're used to, but you got to at least take account for what the fuck's actually going on. You know, I love seeing Brian Kelly, you know, struggling and making excuses every week while Notre Dame's just over there doing their thing. I don't think Notre Dame's going to win a national championship this year or even next year. But Notre Dame's at least taking a blueprint of, oh yeah, let's find guys to fit our culture. Let's, you know, use NIL, let's use transfer portal, and let's develop these guys. I don't think Notre Dame's quite nearly the attractive destination like Ohio State is, like, you know, Michigan is in Ann Arbor, or Oregon is here in Eugene. And Oregon, they keep on talking about Oregon's NIL and all this stuff. Oregon's NIL wasn't even as much as Ohio State's last year. Oregon's NIL wasn't as much as Texas's last year. So you can keep talking about money all you want. Money is only, you know, a part of the equation. Arkansas is struggling, you know, and I don't see them riding a Harley to victory anytime soon. Oklahoma looked like this world beater, even though John Mateer had 5 touchdown passes to 3 interceptions and was being touted as this Heisman, you know, front runner and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, dude, you got a 5-to-3 ratio for touchdowns, interceptions. That's garbage. Oh, but they're so defensive and they, you know, so many weapons. Well, yeah. Wait till you play a Big Ten team. I mean, the Big Ten's got the nastiest defense now. Look what Michigan did 2 years ago. Look what Ohio State did last year. Led the team in defense, total defense, scoring defense. Look what Oregon's doing now. And Oregon's defense is young. And we're playing true freshmen. And we're out there dominating. They are getting the guys that know how to play, and then they're developing them to play better. The SEC, Ryan Williams at Alabama, the dude looks like somebody stole his mojo. It looks like DeCorian Moore went and shook his hand at some sort of 7-on-7 or something and straight robbed the guy of his juice. DeCorian Moore is a goddamn beast. The second best receiver, arguably, with Jordan Tyson in the country right now. And that's as a true freshman. Jordan Tyson's what, a junior? And Jeremiah Smith is a sophomore. Jeremiah's the best. I mean, the guy's, his ball skill is almost unquantifiable. Show me those guys from the SEC. Show me a guy in the SEC who you're like, that QB right there. That guy is a super stud. Diego Pavia. All right, sweet baby Diego. Sweet baby Diego is a stud. Cannot be argued. And we will see what Vanderbilt has to bring to Alabama this year. Alabama was just like gut punched and kicked in the balls last year when Vanderbilt beat them. And they were like, what the fuck? We didn't even know we could lose to Vanderbilt. Yeah, you can lose. And you did lose. And I loved that. Was one of the best games I've ever seen. It's about that mentality. If Alabama's so dominant, why did they get smoked by FSU? Why have they been losing to unranked teams? If Auburn got screwed by the refs at Oklahoma. Straight screwed. That was a fucking stolen game. They stole the W from Auburn and gave it straight to Oklahoma, and then started hyping up Oklahoma like they're these world beaters. And again, they're not. They should have lost. They would have lost to Auburn at home if the refs, those shitty, horrible SEC refs, hadn't have just given the win to Oklahoma. And then everybody was talking about how dangerous Oklahoma is. Yeah, if they got the SEC, if they have the SEC refs helping them out, fucking A, man. The 12th player is a fucking zebra? Dude, you'll beat the world until you come up against a fucking Big Ten team that's like, yeah, even with ref assistance, we'll beat your ass down. It is what it is. I mean, at the end of the day, football is it's judged between the white lines, and I don't see anybody playing better football than Ohio State or Oregon right now. It's really fun to watch the SEC. I'm not saying that I just hate watch them, but I do really relish this whole dynamic that's going on right now every single weekend, where you're like, oh shit, that SEC team is playing some unranked team or a lower ranked team. Man, they might actually get tested. They might actually get beat. That might be a game worth watching, when you could almost pencil in the wins, 10 years ago. And if you can't handle the fact that everything has changed and that your teams are showing signs of not being dominant, and that there isn't a whole lot of, I guess, optimism or hope for the future, that's because there's not. And that's a very, very valid thing to pay attention to. That's something that you should really listen to and take note of, and then hold your team to an appropriate standard. Look at them objectively. Are you really good, or are you just, supposed to be good? Am I just comparing you to the teams from 10 years ago or 5 years ago? Or am I comparing you to the top teams in the league now, and that's the Big Ten? If you really want to have a elite program, you're going to have to go up against the Big Ten. You're going to have to beat the Big Ten. And yeah, you're definitely going to stomp UCLA. You're definitely going to beat a Northwestern or a Purdue. But to the middle of the Big Ten, and especially the top of the Big Ten, good luck. I appreciate every single college football fan out there that tunes in and checks out these podcasts. I'm working on getting my setup a little bit better, more professional, but it's just me doing it. I don't even script this. I don't have any, anything written down or anything that I'm like, oh, I have to, talk about this so I can track that. I've literally had to erase episodes I've recorded before because I fucked up by saying like, oh, I love the Georgia program up until 2022, when I actually, in the podcast, I said it was 2002, and I'm just like, well, I gotta redo that. I can't just put a little disclaimer down in the footnotes of my video saying, hey, I actually meant 2022 instead of 2002. So please bear with me, and if you have any type of response, if you want to talk or debate or have any type of discourse, hit me up in the comments. I'm trying to get a Twitter profile up and going so I can, do some sort of interaction through that as well. But I appreciate anybody that views this stuff. I look forward to hearing back from you guys. If you want to, tell me how good your team is and why they're going to be great, I will listen to you. I might not agree with you, but I will listen to you. And I'll do my best to show you the respect and the, I guess, open-mindedness that we should all have when we're talking about things that we're passionate about. Obviously, it's subjective as hell. Everybody's a fan. If you're a fan, that's short for fanatic, and that means that you're just crazy passionate, and there might not be any logic behind it. It could just be straight up fucking, love and hopes and wishes and all sorts of expectations, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, if you can't accept that your team or your conference is lacking in major necessary areas, then you're not going to be successful. And I think the only way to be successful if you're in that scenario is to address those things that need to be addressed and improve on them, or at least acknowledge that they exist, so that way you can get some sort of game plan to correct those issues. So that said, I hope you guys have a great week. Go Ducks, and can't wait to see some of those SEC teams in the playoffs.